1. I study at the library every day. I'm studying at the library right now. The simple present tense versus the present progressive tense, advanced. How do we know which verb tense to use, the simple present or the present progressive? Let's look at when we use the simple present tense. We use the simple present tense to state facts. For example, I live in the US. The car is gray. They have a new video game. We hear music. The library closes at 9 o'clock. We also use the simple present tense to talk about habits and repeated actions. For example, she always studies in the library. They are never late for class. I take piano lessons every Monday. The basketball team practices on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We can look for clues to use the simple present tense. One clue is that the sentence contains an adverb of frequency, such as always, often, frequently, usually, sometimes, occasionally, seldom, rarely, or never. Clue number 2 is that the sentence talks about how often something happens. For example, the sentence will contain a phrase such as every day, once a week, twice a month, on Fridays, on Mondays and Wednesdays, every summer. Sentences containing phrases like these or adverbs of frequency are usually in the simple present tense. But be careful, not every sentence using the simple present tense will have an adverb of frequency or describe how often something happens. Usually sentences that state facts do not, such as he lives in New Hampshire, she works at the mall, they are from Texas. Now let's look at when we use the present progressive tense. There's 3 different uses: to talk about an activity that is happening when the person is speaking, to talk about temporary situations, and to talk about a future event. Let's look at use number 1, to talk about an activity that is happening when the person is speaking. For example, they are talking to the teacher now. Right now, they're leaving for the airport. Ahmed is working at the moment. She is running in the park. A clue is that you can look for words that suggest the action is happening now. For example, now, right now, at the moment, today, these days, or currently. But sentences using the present progressive tense don't always contain a word like now or today. For example, sentences like she is running in the park, they are reading in the library. The fact that these sentences are in the present progressive tense is enough to suggest the action is happening now. So what's the difference between she runs in the park and she is running in the park? As a native English speaker, when I hear the sentence, she runs in the park, I think this is a habit, that when she goes running, this is where she goes running. When I hear she is running in the park, I believe that this is happening now. Let's look at use number 2 to talk about temporary situations. For example, he's living with his parents until he finds a job. They're studying algebra this semester. I'm working from home this week. We are staying at the Marriott during our vacation. So let's look at and compare permanent versus temporary situations. Consider the sentence, we live in Boston. This is in the simple present. It suggests a permanent situation. Usually where you live is permanent, even though we all move at some point. Compare that to, we are living with my parents. This is in the present progressive. It suggests a temporary situation. If it was permanent, the person would likely say, we live with my parents. Let's look at another couple of sentences. For example, my son is a banker. He works for Bank of America. This is in the simple present. It suggests permanence. Careers and jobs are considered indefinite. Compare that to, my son is studying business at Boston College. It's in the present progressive. It suggests a temporary situation. Native English speakers often refer to education as temporary and use the present progressive tense to talk about studying. Even though a degree program may take 4 or more years, they are temporary. You will finish someday. Use number 3 to talk about a future planned event. They're having lunch together tomorrow. He is flying to London next week. They're going out on a date this weekend. The clue you can use is to look for a phrase or word that describes future time, such as tomorrow, next week, or this weekend. Be careful. Sentences using the present progressive tense to talk about a future time won't always state a specific time. So what's the difference between they're having lunch together tomorrow and they're having lunch together? They're having lunch together tomorrow. The word tomorrow tells the listener it is a future event. Without the word tomorrow, the listener could easily assume the action is happening now. Sometimes you have to use logic. If you hear they're having lunch together and it's said at 7 o'clock in the morning and you know that lunch is a midday meal, then you would assume their lunch is in the future. But if you hear someone say they're having lunch together and it's said at 11 o'clock, you may be unsure if the lunch is in the present or the future. So you can just ask, say when. Now there are some verbs we usually don't use with the present progressive tense. For example, we don't usually use the present progressive tense with verbs of state, such as be, as in he is Colombian, seem, as in she seems anxious, appear, she appeared confused, exist, we don't know if life exists on Mars. Now you might hear an American say something like, he is being childish, using be in the present progressive tense. But he doesn't mean it as if to describe a state. What the person's talking about is that this individual is acting in a childish manner. The present progressive tense is usually not used with verbs of possession, such as have, as in I have a new cell phone, own, we own a small house, or possess, he possesses many wonderful qualities. Oftentimes, native English speakers will say, I am having fish for dinner, or something to that effect. But they're not talking about possession. What they're talking about is, I am eating fish for dinner. The present progressive tense is usually not used with verbs of feeling or need, such as like, as in, I like vanilla ice cream, or love, he loves his children. Hate, she hates taking tests. Want, they want to move. Need, I need new shoes. Prefer, he prefers to work alone. Or wish, she wishes they had better weather. The present progressive tense is usually not used with verbs of thought, such as think, I think he is right. Believe, they believe he is a good worker. Know, she knows how to make bread. Imagine, I imagine he has a difficult job. Or understand, you understand many things. You may hear a native English speaker talking about thinking in the present progressive, as in, I am thinking about going to the beach tomorrow. This is describing more of an active mental process, that the person is considering something. The present progressive tense is usually not used with verbs describing sensory experiences, such as see, I see the beach. Hear, I hear music. Taste, I taste a bit of cinnamon in the coffee. Smell, I smell freshly baked cookies. Or feel, I feel cold. Now you often hear people using feel in the present progressive, as in he is feeling nervous about his presentation. That's because we often use feeling to describe emotional experiences. So in summary, many times it is easy for an intermediate to advanced English student to know when to use the simple present versus the present progressive tense. Occasionally, it's unclear. When it is, if you're speaking or writing, think about your intent. Does it fit better with the guidelines for use of the simple present or the present continuous? If you're listening, remember that native English speakers don't always follow the rules of English grammar. Try to understand the person's meaning. If you don't understand, you could ask the person or make a note of the sentence and ask somebody else. Thank you.